ATF raids a firearms museum, antique displays mask, modern gun trafficking. A respected firearms museum becomes the unlikely front for a hidden weapons pipeline, where antique displays quietly shielded the movement of modern guns into criminal hands. The raid did not target a warehouse, a cartel stash house, or a back alley gun dealer. It targeted a museum, an institution trusted to preserve history, educate the public, and safeguard the past. Behind polished display cases and carefully curated exhibits, federal agents would uncover something no visitor ever imagined: a functioning modern gun trafficking operation concealed behind antique labels and patriotic storytelling. This was not negligence, it was design. What followed was not just a raid, it was a reckoning, a respectable front. The Heritage Arms Museum sat quietly on the edge of a historic district, surrounded by brick storefronts and guided tour placards. School groups visited during the day. Veterans volunteered as docents. Collectors donated rare pieces, believing they were contributing to preservation, not profit. Inside, the displays were immaculate. Revolutionary-era muskets, Civil War rifles, World War II sidearms, each weapon cataloged, labeled, and placed behind reinforced glass. Docents spoke about craftsmanship. Placards explained mechanical evolution. Donors were thanked publicly. To the public, it was harmless, educational, even patriotic. To the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, it was something else entirely. Because museums, unlike gun shops, occupy a legal gray zone. They can store firearms, they can transport them for exhibitions, they can receive donations from private collectors. They are inspected infrequently and trusted implicitly. And if someone knows how to exploit that gray zone, they can hide almost anything in plain sight. The first red flag. The case did not begin at the museum. It began with a handgun, a compact, modern, semi-automatic pistol recovered at a crime scene 2 states away. The serial number had been professionally altered, not scratched out, but chemically removed and restamped in a way that suggested advanced tooling. When ATF traced the weapon's origin, they found something odd. The original serial number belonged to a firearm listed as deactivated for display decades earlier. Its last recorded location? A firearms museum. At first, agents assumed clerical error. Museums are notorious for outdated inventories. But then another gun surfaced, and another. Different models, different crimes, same paper trail, all of them supposedly locked behind glass. The paper trail that didn't add up. ATF auditors requested inventory records from the museum. The response was prompt, polite, and detailed, almost too detailed. Every firearm was accounted for, every transfer documented, every restoration justified. But the documents told a story that reality contradicted. Some weapons listed as permanently disabled were showing up fully functional on the street. Others listed as antiques were, in fact, modern reproductions modified to accept contemporary parts. Even more troubling, certain weapons had serial numbers that matched museum records, but internal components that did not exist at the time those weapons were supposedly manufactured. Someone was swapping parts. Someone was rebuilding history into something lethal. And someone inside the museum knew exactly what they were doing. The curator. At the center of the institution was its curator, a respected historian with decades of experience. He gave interviews. He wrote books. He spoke passionately about preserving the past, so future generations could understand the cost of freedom. His reputation extended beyond the museum walls, earning him invitations to academic panels, collector conventions, and historical symposiums across the country. To the public, he was a scholar. To investigators, he was an anomaly. Financial records showed income far exceeding his salary. Multiple shell companies paid consulting fees for vague services. Frequent international travel with no academic justification. Luxury expenditures appeared that could not be reconciled with museum compensation. When agents dug deeper, they found something more alarming. Several donors listed in museum records did not exist. Donation certificates were backed by fabricated addresses and unverifiable identities. They were ghost collectors, names used to legitimize incoming weapons that had never been part of any private collection. The museum was not just displaying firearms, it was laundering them. How the scheme worked. The operation was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its reach. Modern firearms, often purchased legally through straw buyers or secondary markets, were delivered to the museum under the cover of restoration, educational replicas, or historical comparison projects. Once inside, museum documentation transformed them from regulated weapons into untouchable artifacts. Serial numbers were altered or replaced with numbers copied from legitimately registered antiques. Modern barrels were sleeved with period-correct casings. Trigger assemblies and firing pins were modified to avoid ballistic matching. Even more sophisticated was the paperwork. Weapons were logged, temporarily deaccessioned, and quietly reintroduced under different identities. In some cases, a single antique serial number was reused across multiple modern firearms. From there, the weapons moved again. Some were sold to private collectors who believed they were acquiring rare historical pieces. Others traveled overseas as part of educational exhibitions. Many simply vanished, reappearing months later in criminal investigations. History provided the camouflage, respectability provided the shield, and the museum provided the perfect laundering mechanism. The inside source. Every major investigation has a fracture point. This one came from a volunteer. A retired machinist who helped with restorations noticed something that didn't sit right. He recognized modern CNC machining marks on weapons supposedly crafted by hand a century ago. At first, he said nothing. Then he asked questions. Those questions were not welcomed. Access was restricted. Tasks were reassigned. Eventually, he was told his services were no longer needed. Instead of walking away, he contacted federal authorities. What he provided, photos, notes, and first-hand observations, gave ATF the final piece they needed: probable cause. The raid. The raid was planned with precision and restraint. No press notifications, no sirens, no dramatic forced entry. Federal agents entered the museum before opening hours, moving deliberately past velvet ropes and informational placards. Keys were used, codes were entered. The goal was evidence, not spectacle. Behind the glass, they found what the public never saw: hidden compartments beneath display bases, false walls behind exhibition panels, crates marked as archival storage containing modern rifle receivers, suppressor components, and unregistered parts. In the basement, agents discovered workshops that rivaled commercial manufacturing facilities. Industrial lathes, milling machines, and precision tools capable of producing firearms parts at scale. This was not preservation. This was production. By the end of the operation, dozens of weapons were seized, many already linked to violent crimes and interstate trafficking cases. The museum doors closed that day and never reopened. The fallout. The fallout was immediate and far-reaching. Donors demanded their firearms back, only to learn some had been irreversibly altered or stripped of their original historical value. Lending institutions launched urgent internal audits, retracing years of transactions. Insurance companies froze coverage, citing undisclosed risks and potential fraud exposure. Other museums across the country quietly reviewed their inventories, fearing what similar scrutiny might uncover within their own collections. Charges followed swiftly: conspiracy, illegal firearms trafficking, money laundering, false statements to federal authorities. The curator, once a respected authority, now faced decades in federal prison, his academic legacy collapsing under the weight of criminal evidence. But the case did more than dismantle one operation. It exposed a dangerous blind spot: how reverence for cultural institutions can override scrutiny, allowing crime to flourish behind respectability. Why it went undetected. The question haunted investigators. How did this last so long? The answer was uncomfortable. No one wants to suspect a museum. No one expects crime behind glass cases and donor plaques. Oversight agencies focus on dealers, not docents. The scheme relied on reverence, on the assumption that history is harmless. But history, when weaponized, can be as dangerous as any criminal enterprise. The broader implications. In the aftermath, the ATF issued updated guidance to museums and historical institutions nationwide, tightening reporting requirements and redefining what constitutes deactivated or display-only firearms. Inventory audits became more frequent. Documentation standards were raised. Institutions once trusted on reputation alone were now expected to meet verifiable compliance benchmarks. But enforcement remained delicate. Museums walk a narrow line between preservation and regulation. Too much oversight risks pushing private collections into unregulated hands or discouraging public exhibitions altogether. Too little allows exploitation by individuals who understand how to manipulate tradition, paperwork, and public trust. This case forced regulators to confront an uncomfortable truth. Crime evolves faster than tradition. Criminal networks adapt, learning how to disguise modern operations behind respected facades. And when criminals learn how to weaponize trust, the consequences are never theoretical. They are measured in lives. The human cost. Several weapons traced back to the museum were linked to violent crimes, robberies, gang conflicts, murders. Each recovery told a story, not just of criminal violence, but of systemic failure. These were weapons that should never have left controlled environments, yet they ended up in neighborhoods, hands, and moments where irreversible harm followed. Each case represented a failure not only of law enforcement safeguards, but of collective vigilance. The museum's mission had been to educate, to contextualize violence within history. Instead, it quietly fueled chaos in the present. For families affected by those crimes, the revelation was devastating. A place meant to honor the past had helped destroy futures, leaving grief, anger, and unanswered questions in its wake. Echoes in empty display cases. As the investigation concluded, agents returned one last time, not to seize evidence, but to catalog the remnants of an institution undone by its own deception. Display cases stood empty. Labels pointed to nothing. History, stripped of its false armor, lay exposed. The building would eventually be sold. The collection dispersed. The story, however, would remain. A reminder that crime does not always hide in shadows. Sometimes it stands proudly under spotlights. This story wasn't just about guns, it was about trust, and how easily it can be manipulated when no one is looking. If you believe accountability should apply to everyone, even institutions wrapped in history and prestige, if you want more investigations that expose what hides behind respectable facades, subscribe, stay informed, and share this story. Because the next scandal may already be on display, and no one is asking the right questions.